Hello again to another Aga Color Reacts. Today we'll be watching, sorry there's a lamp next to the microphone. Today we'll be watching maps that will change how you see the world from Top 10s. What is, I believe the same crew that do Today I Found Out. So usually it's very interesting videos. So let's just get into it and let's just see what kind of maps are going to show us.
Just before we get started, some of you might know that I have another channel called Mega Projects, which is all about mega projects. If you don't, please do subscribe to it. Well, by popular demand, I wanted to cover some things on that channel that weren't quite mega enough for it. So I present to you a new channel called Side Projects, covering secret Soviet space weapons, World War II's greatest airplanes, history's lost treasures, and the movements of London Bridge from London to a random town in America. Stuff like that. New videos every week. In fact, 3 times a week on that channel. So if you were thinking you don't get enough videos from me, well, please do check it out and let's get into it. Our mental image of world geography is derived from many subjective factors like where we grow up and our political beliefs. Still, that image turns out to be very similar for most of us, as modern maps are largely uniform around the world. That's also exactly why it's almost always wrong, as the maps we use to find our way around Earth are almost entirely wrong. We can't say that all of them were intentionally made that way, as cartography requires some level of simplification in order to map out all the edges and curves of our planet, though some were definitely influenced by the prevailing views of the time. All of them, though, could end up changing how you imagine these places. Number 8. More people live inside this tiny circle than outside. The world has over 7.5 billion people now, which doesn't seem like a big deal considering how big the planet is. Vast swaths of lands, like most of Australia and Russia, still lie uninhabited, either due to political conflicts, inhospitable climate, or simply not being very nice places to live. So, where are all the people? The answer is, as you'd expect, somewhere in Asia. Consider this. More than half of the world's population would fit inside an imaginary circle in the southeast of Asia,
India,
as well as
China.
Oceania, with a diameter
There are
of
both
around
more than
5,000
billion
miles.
people living
It's
there.
not a surprise, as this relatively tiny circle houses the densely and highly populated countries of China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, with a total population of over 4 billion people. Number 7. Brazil is larger than the whole contiguous United States. When we think of Brazil, we don't imagine it as a small country, though we might not imagine it as a particularly large country either. It comes across to be as big as a large state in the USA, and not, say, the 5th largest country in the world. If you take a look at the South American map, you'll see that it's not just true, but rather Brazil is very clearly bigger than most countries we know of. It's considerably larger than the entire contiguous USA, and is almost as big as the entire continent of Europe. The reason we don't imagine it to be particularly huge is because of the Amazon. About 60% of the world's largest rainforest lies inside Brazilian territory, almost all of which is still sparsely populated and undeveloped due to the accessibility of the terrain. Number 6. The Mercator projection. Just take a look at the map of the world and you'll see some glaring inaccuracies. Take Greenland, which looks to be almost as big as Africa. Anyone who knows the first thing about both of these places can say that it can't be true, and it isn't. Go over to Africa and you'll see that it's bigger than the United States, India, China, and Brazil combined. Africa is around 14 times larger than Greenland, yet looks to be around the same size, give or take, on some of our most common maps. The reason for that, along with many other inaccuracies, is that our current map uses the Mercator projection of the world map, which is only one of the many projections we have. It was first published in 1569 and maps the world taking a cylindrical approach instead of directly translating a sphere to a circle. It's not as easy as it sounds, and it was actually a good way to do it, except that it ends up distorting the shape and size of many countries around the world. Europe is also unrealistically bigger in the Mercator projection than it is in reality, though that is in line with the largely Eurocentric view of the cartographers back when the map was first made. Number 5. Asia and Europe are actually the same continent. Even if most people know that Europe and Asia are different countries, they wouldn't be able to tell you why that is. Unlike obviously different landmasses like North and South America, Europe and Asia don't seem to have any natural border at all. There's no immediate difference in climate, terrain, types of rocks, or really anything else on the right and left side of the Europe-Asia border. The Urals could be a working natural border, though if applicable, many countries like Georgia would fall in Asia. There's also the problem of Russia, as its territories have wildly changed throughout its history, with no clear demarcation between its European and Asian sides. For all intents and purposes, Asia and Europe are the same continent, and the difference only lies in the geopolitics of geography. Both Asia and Europe were defined by Greek cartographers according to the political status quo at the time, and the border has little to do with cultural or natural borders. It eventually got adopted by other European and Asian kingdoms as it is, giving way to the strict Europe and Asia border that we have today. Number 4. Texas is on the same latitude as Bhutan. One of the biggest problems with the Mercator projection is that it makes the northernmost countries look much bigger than they are, and as we mentioned before, that comes with a bunch of complications. One of them is our gross misjudgment of how far north Europe and the USA are with respect to each other. Unsurprisingly, the latitudinal counterpart of New York City isn't London at all, but Azerbaijan. It becomes even clearer when you compare the southern states of the country. Texas, for example, is on about the same latitude as Bhutan, which is a South Asian country. The reason we believe this, and still don't feel like anything is off in our perception, is the weirdly warm temperature of Europe despite its proximity to the Arctic. That's because of the warm waters from the Gulf of Mexico that flow all the way to Europe, giving it its longer summers and Mediterranean climate. Number 3. 2/3 of Africa is above the equator. Here's a question. Is the equator above, below, or somewhere around the top in Africa? Most people would probably go with somewhere
over
around
here.
the top, because that sounds about right. After all, the equator
Or
is
here.
what separates
Some
Europe
over
from
here.
Africa. For
So
most of us,
that's Congo,
culturally
isn't it?
as well
Republic
as
of Congo?
geographically.
It goes to
See
the
an
Congo.
accurate map, though, and you'll realize how inaccurate that perception really is. While the equator does pass through Africa, it's much lower than we're imagining it. It actually cuts Africa almost in two halves, except the continent is way bigger towards the top because of how Africa is shaped. Africa is also way more towards the north than South America. Number 2. The British Empire was almost as big as the moon. If we talk about the biggest empires in history, something like the Mongol Empire or even Alexander the Great comes to mind. While they were definitely high on the list, by far the biggest empire was that of the British, and we simply have no human perspective for how big it really was. If it's not clear by the overwhelming usage of the English language and British technologies around the world, consider that at its peak, the British Empire was also colloquially known as the empire on which the sun never sets.
Never heard that
This was
before.
because it was daytime in at least one of the numerous British colonies around the world at all times. It was almost as big as the entire surface area
Wow.
of the moon and about twice as big as Pluto. Number 1. New York is on the same longitude as Bogota, Colombia. When we think of both of the American continents, yes, that's north and south, we typically imagine them to be vertically aligned, with some differences here and there. We think of the east side of the USA as being on about the same longitude as the east side of South America. That's why it comes as a surprise to most people that South America is almost entirely east of the USA. In fact, Africa may be closer to South America than many places in America. The reason the maps don't account for this is, again, the Mercator projection. South America is shown to be almost comparable to the United States, even if it's way larger. The longitudinal counterpart of, say, New York isn't somewhere in Brazil, as you would imagine, but Bogota in Colombia. Even Lima, one of the westernmost cities in the continent, falls on the same longitude as some places in
That
the
really
United
surprised
States.
me, 'cause,
As you can
yeah.
guess, that means almost the entire United States is west of South America. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Please do also check out my new channel's side projects linked to below. And thank you for watching.
Okay, Simon, have a great day. Okay, guys, did you know about this first one? Did I ever, I always liked geography, so I was kind of looking at maps and things like that, but I never really noticed the fact about the New York being the same longitude that Bogota in Colombia. Like New York, east of America. Colombia and Bogota, west of Colombia in west of South America. So, but yeah, never really. Yeah, that Mercator projection really screw our way of seeing the world, isn't it? That really kind of changed the way how I'm looking at the world now. Did those maps change your view of the world as well? I'm interested to know. Just let me know. Did you find this interesting? Because I did. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!